Starting us off at number 10 is smell. I can't believe this is a law in Quebec. I'm literally shooketh. I complain about the smells of the city on a daily basis when I'm in the car and the windows are down and out of nowhere the stench of a sewer just wafts in. Or when you're walking down the street and it smells like dog shite, like nah, B, miss me with that literally. Well, under the Criminal Code of Canada, it's illegal to comment about any foul smells in public or even offend the public with a bad smell. It's probably to protect small businesses that deal with smelly trades like fish, for example, or it's because Canada is just overly polite. If this is true, I literally break this law every single day, no cap, no exaggeration, and for that, I regret nothing. Coming in at number 9 is singing happy birthday. Who would have thought? I feel like knowing this would have saved a lot of people the embarrassment when everyone's looking at them singing, expecting them to grow wings or take flight or something. Like, what can I do when you're singing, people? Awkwardly just look at the cake, that's what. Except I love attention, so this one really doesn't apply to me. Haha, sucks to suck. Either way, since the song Happy Birthday is copyrighted, you can't actually sing it in public unless you want to pay major royalties. The Girl Scouts found this out the hard way when the American Society of Composers, Authors and Publishers asked them to pay royalties for singing Happy Birthday to You around the campfire. No one paid to hear them sing it, but the law applies to any public performance of the song where a substantial number of persons outside of a normal circle of a family and its social acquaintances is gathered. Of course, you can sing it in the privacy of your own home, but if you're a small business owner or, anyone outside, then you have to pay Time Warner royalties. The company makes $2 million a year just from this. Mind blown. Filling our number 7 slot is stealing Wi-Fi. You are lying if you say you've never ran out of data and tried connecting to any open Wi-Fi networks that your phone picks up. It never works, but it's still worth a try, you know what I mean? For me, the networks are either always password protected or lead me to some other page about signing up for some spam email thing just to get the Wi-Fi. Not worth it. It's very easy though. I feel like if you're in public and turn the Wi-Fi on your laptop on, it'll connect to any unsecure network in seconds. It's not my fault. Either way, you can blame your laptop, but it's still illegal. According to the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, it's a crime to gain unauthorized access to any computer or website. Unauthorized access meaning Wi-Fi squatting from any Wi-Fi router. Disregard the CFA, most states have regulations against unlawful access to networks and computers. It's a 3rd-degree felony which can land your ass in prison for at least 2 years and cost 10 grand in fines. So you may want to think twice before you're out in public and decide to connect to networks like Lord of Voldemodem or Vladimir Computin. Now at number 6 are markers. This one applies more to people still in school. Thankfully I am not, so sucks to suck, losers. Actually, I'm kidding, education is wonderful, but also the system is broken. I'm very 50-50 on this. And honestly, it also depends on what kind of note taker you are. Do you use the same ballpoint pen for everything, or do you use different colors for the title and each point? I was probably in the middle somewhere, like I like color and organization, but I'm not over the top. Either way, say you're just chilling on your phone before school, backpack or packed with your stationery, you are breaking a law. According to any anti-graffiti state law anywhere, it's illegal to have broad-tipped indelible markers in Publix since they can be used for vandalism. That also makes it a crime for you to buy markers if you're under the age of 18, which is insane. An age limit on buying alcohol and cigarettes or weed I can understand, but pens? The law exists because states like California spend millions a year removing graffiti. To be honest, I'd rather nice graffiti covers a city's wall than chipped paint or just nothing at all. Coming in at number 5 is sitting on the sidewalk. Sometimes you just get tired, sometimes you're waiting for the bus or an Uber and you just need to sit on the pavement. Sometimes it's 2 AM and you're drunk or waiting for an Uber and your heels need to come off and you need to sit down. You've been in them for like 3 hours, it bloody hurts. But no, apparently there's a law prohibiting that along with my happiness. In 53% of American cities, including places like California, Virginia Beach and Santa Cruz, there are laws against sitting or lying down in public. Sit-lie laws make it a misdemeanor to sit, recline or lie down on any street, sidewalk, alley, curb or entrance to any store or other place of business. Yes, the law is aimed at the homeless population, but they're not the only ones that do it. At number 4 are fake names. We have all done this. No one puts their real name as their username on PSN or Xbox Live, and sometimes people just create fake names on Facebook for fun. It's a thing, and it's common. Hell, I even had a fake name on Club Penguin. I don't give a but I guess I should since it's on this list. As I mentioned previously, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act says unauthorized access is illegal. Say you get onto a private website and into a company's documents by using a fake name to register, that's technically unauthorized. It counts as hacking and can get you 5 to 20 years in jail. Take prison guard Matthew LaCroix for example. Back in 2010, he made a fake Facebook profile for his boss. He didn't even do anything with the account, it was just there, but he was still convicted of fraudulent information and had to pay $500. Matthew, what have you done? Filling another 3 slot is swearing. Amongst the 4 hosts on the channel, I can confirm I have the biggest potty mouth for sure. I feel like it's a tie between me and Che off camera, but on camera it's definitely me. It's hard not to, honestly. Swear words can be used as adjectives, nouns, verbs, adverbs, even interjections, people. Sucks for me though, because in Toronto and Quebec City, there are laws centering around regulating public conduct, meaning no swearing allowed. You can't even swear in French in Montreal. They went bilingual on this. Of course, this law is old as hell and enforcing it is practically impossible, but a law is still a law. Now, number 2 is jaywalking. Everybody does this. If you think you have never done it, you are lying to all of us, and more importantly, you're lying to your goddamn self. It's not news, everyone knows jaywalking is illegal. Almost every major US city has jaywalking as a law. The punishments vary, of course. In New York or LA, you could get fined for $250, and in Las Vegas, someone could just hit you with their car and kill you. The range is huge. It's actually funny, when I was super young, my dad told me this fact that I have never forgotten and that I literally tell everyone I meet. Whenever you cross the street, always walk on the crosswalk, because say a car hits you and kills you, if you're on the crosswalk, then they can get arrested for manslaughter. If you were just jaywalking, technically you were in the wrong. Screw this law. I'm not gonna jaywalk, not because it's illegal, but because I want to screw my killer over after I die. You ain't getting away with my death. It's gonna be on your conscience for the rest of your goddamn life. And finally, at number 1 are baths. In my humble opinion, baths are sacred. I can't tell you how many days probably I spent in the bath growing up and just reading books. Even now, I love taking baths and just watching something on Netflix. It is divine. And of course, I fill it up halfway to full with a Lush bath bomb, if maybe I have one at the time. But apparently, that's illegal in Etobicoke, which is a municipality amalgamated in Toronto, in case you're not Canadian. The law states you can't have more than 3.5 inches of water in a bathtub. My phone is 6.22 inches long. You're saying I can't fill my bathtub up over half the length of my phone? What's even gonna be covered with that much water? Half of my ankle? I know baths are a massive waste of water and are not environmentally conscious. I accept that. I get it. I know it's bad. But just for this one thing, it just feels so good to be bad, you know?
Starting us off at number 10, clean cars. For a place with such frequent sandstorms, you would assume they'd understand if you had some dirt on your car. But apparently not. In the United Arab Emirates, or UAE, a dusty car is seen as an act of disfiguring the city image and public health. And therefore, if your car is not kept in pristine, sparkling condition, you risk having it towed and will likely face some pretty hefty impound fees. However, it gets even more complicated, because while it is imperative that your car remain clean and dust-free, there are very strict rules surrounding where and how you are permitted to wash said car. Any public area, including residential areas, are illegal. In fact, the only place you can wash the car is, well, the car wash at gas stations. And if you are caught rinsing off the vehicle in anywhere deemed an inappropriate place, you are also fined. So no matter what, there is a possibility of getting into some trouble. Coming in at number 9, public snacking. While it's not prohibited to eat or drink in public in general, except during Ramadan, there is one place that no matter the time of day or year, eating and drinking is strictly banned: public transit. This ban covers not only the buses and other forms of transportation, but the stations and even pedestrian crossings too. Apparently, they just really do not want people to drink their morning coffee on the go. Reportedly, the ban was put in place with good intentions, as they were trying to cut back on littering in public spaces, which honestly, fair enough, because people are insane with their litter. However, it's apparently been kind of over-enforced by authorities since it was put in place. Now, luckily with this one, if you are caught, the fine isn't too hefty, only setting you back an equivalent of like $35, but still, it is a very strange rule to have in the first place. Coming in at number 8, flush curfew. Out of all the things on this list, I have to say this is the one that makes me giggle. I just have so many questions about how and why this came to be. Apparently, it is against the law in Dubai to flush your toilet after 10 p.m. And yes, this is real. According to the city's website, apparently the reason behind the regulation was to reduce flooding and water waste, and so that they could ensure that all residents enjoy a peaceful night's sleep. Now, to be fair, this one isn't hurting anybody, so why not? But I do also wonder how this is truly being enforced. Like, how would they know if you flushed your toilet at 10:02? What is the fine? What is the risk you take? Plus, as public restrooms in Dubai are fitted with bidets, it's also illegal to flush toilet paper or anything else down them. So just be warned. Coming in at number 7, living arrangements. In Dubai, one of the laws that is definitely far from North American practices is that it is straight up illegal to live with someone you are not married to. Now, does that mean it never happens? Of course not. Remember, people do things that they are not supposed to do all the time. But still, it is far from allowed. Also, I know that this one seems pretty obvious considering what we know about the UAE, but it's actually a bit more complicated than it sounds. The law surrounding living with someone who you aren't married to doesn't just ban living with someone prior to marriage, but it also means that adults can't live with anyone they aren't married to, meaning 2 young adults cannot live together as friends even. Apparently, the only way for a single person to find a place to live before marriage that isn't, of course, their parents' house is if the place they are renting from is owned by their parents or siblings. So no matter what, if you're following the law, your parents will be your landlord until you marry. Coming in at number 6, PDA. While there are some obvious forms of PDA that I can totally understand would be restricted, especially in conservative areas like the UAE, believe it or not, pretty much any public display of affection is seen as indecent and a violation of modesty rules, even for married couples. These so-called indecent acts can include kissing, hugging, and even holding hands with your partner. And if caught, infringers can face fines, jail time, and in some really extreme cases, deportation. It's hard to imagine this from our Western lens. I mean, PDA is literally everywhere, it seems, but apparently in Dubai, couples can be apprehended for simply holding hands while walking down the street. So I suppose the moral of the story here is to maybe consider a different destination if you're on your honeymoon. Next up at number 5, snooping. Privacy rights are huge in the UAE, and on one hand, it makes sense. However, there are some circumstances where I'd say it gets a little intense, and that instance is when it comes to people's phones. So in Dubai and the rest of the UAE, it is against the law to peek into anyone's phone without their explicit consent, which, I mean, again, doesn't sound so terrible at first, but just hear me out. This rule extends to any circumstance, so we're not just talking about hacking into someone's phone or computer. You can actually be arrested for just opening up their phone to read a message or sending yourself a photo from their camera roll. Now, of course, the way to get around this is to ask for their permission, which I know seems obvious and would work in most cases to avoid the trouble. But this law is still upheld even if you suspect illegal activity, adultery, or any other number of bad things. So if you're in Dubai, just keep your eyes on your own phone, otherwise you risk paying up to $4,000 to fix the problem. Next up at number 4, poppy seeds. If you happen to enjoy a lemon poppy seed muffin or an everything bagel, I have some bad news for you if you ever travel to Dubai. One of these stranger things that I found out that are illegal in the UAE are poppy seeds. Now, to be fair, the reason behind all of this kind of makes sense if you don't think about it too hard. As most people are aware, poppy seeds are the source of opium, which is understandably a banned substance in the UAE. However, this ban extends to literally just possessing the seed in any form. Anyone found with poppy seeds will face intense punishment, such as jail time, and if you're traveling with them, you risk having your possessions seized by custom officials. officials. I mean, I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but it seems like a bit of a leap to ban them entirely. But hey, at least now you know not to try and cross the border with an everything bagel in your hand. Coming in at number 3, fundraising. Countries in North America host fundraisers all the time. Schools get their students to sell chocolate bars, cookie dough, or other treats to send themselves on trips. Nonprofit companies host car washes or round up empty bottles for the depot, and there is literally a giant website dedicated to fundraising for quite literally anything you might want money for. I mean, honestly, in North America, if we can't afford something and we can find a way to not pay for it ourselves, we will. In Dubai, however, private fundraising is strictly forbidden. Anyone caught doing so is not only subject to jail time, but can actually be fined up to the equivalent of $200,000 for it too, and in some cases risk being deported. Now the good news about this is you'll never feel guilty if you don't buy a chocolate bar from some grade 8 to send them on their band trip. But jokes aside, a world with no fundraiser is so different from the custom here. Now to be fair, this ban does have an exception, and that is charity. However, any charity must first receive a stamp of approval from the Islamic Affairs and Charity Activities Department, and all funds must be used for humanitarian endeavors. Without their stamp of approval, even if your charity is raising money for good, it is breaking the law. Coming in at number 2, gossip. In Western countries, the concept of the rumor mill is something we literally encounter every single day. I mean, whether we're talking about tabloids, someone going online and seeing something about a time they encountered a celebrity, or people just trying to stir up the pot. There are literally empires that are built on rumors and gossip. However, if you ever find yourself in Dubai, beware that they have a much different culture surrounding rumors. The belief is essentially that gossip can damage social peace and public order, and essentially it's seen as a threat to national peace. So they quite intensely crack down at even a whisper of a rumor beginning, meaning anything constructed as a rumor is punishable by law, and any form of gossip, especially on social media, can result in up to 3 years behind bars and a fine of 1 million dirhams, or roughly $360,000. And last up in our number 1 spot, swearing. Whether it's online or in a restaurant, swearing is 100% off limits in any public setting within the UAE, including the city of Dubai. Seen as a disgrace to the lifestyle of honor and modesty, anyone caught swearing can be fined up to 10,000 dirhams, which equals a little less than 4,000 Canadian, and is definitely a culture shock for a lot of people. Now, the interesting thing is that some words are viewed as worse than others. The F word, for example, is seen as the ultimate no-no, and saying that could land you in prison for up to a year. And believe it or not, it doesn't stop there. As we know, there is more than one way to communicate, of course, and gestures that exhibit the same essence as a swear word, like flipping the bird for example, are seen as indecent acts that breach pride and modesty and could result in deportation. I mean, I have to wonder how people handle road rage here. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, swearing online is also not allowed. Using swear words in WhatsApp messages or on any kind of social media platform breaches cyber laws. Plus, if you get caught sending emojis or anything deemed an indecent gesture, you could face a fine of up to 250 dirhams, or roughly $90,000, and risk being sent to prison or deported from the country. So if you do visit, for the love of God, don't start quoting a Tarantino movie.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have no gum. You know when some people choose to do something wrong and then it ruins things for everyone who wasn't doing the wrong thing? Yeah, well that's exactly what happened in Singapore, and now no one can chew gum. There were some people who decided to try and mess with the mass rapid transit system, and they used chewing gum to do it. These people ended up costing the Housing and Development Board $150,000 a year just to clean up this gum, so in 1992 they banned it. They banned all gum substances, and so anyone importing, selling, or making gum can potentially face fines or even jail time. In 2004, however, there was an exemption made for those who needed gum for therapeutic, dental, or nicotine chewing gum reasons, and those can be bought from a doctor or a pharmacist. In our number 9 spot today, we have strange cows. This law is one that was repealed in 1974 because at one point, I'm sure sure this made a lot of sense, but surely by 1974 and especially by now, it is just hilarious. This law is from Texas, and it stated that whoever, without the consent of the owner, shall take up, use, or milk any cow not his own, faced a $10 fine. How weirdly specific. There was a law and a specific amount of a fine set up just for milking a stranger's cow. I mean, I feel like I understand why this one is illegal, because how strange is it to milk someone else's cow? A little intrusive if you ask me, to be honest. Of course, the only reason you'd be milking someone else's cow would be to steal the milk, and that is rude to do now, but back in the day that could have had much heavier implications. Although that specific law was repealed, there is still a law in Texas that is in regards to the same sort of thing. It is still illegal to milk someone's cow without permission, but now you'll be charged with theft and trespassing instead of that flat $10 rate. Also, who wants to be the weirdo stealing milk straight from a cow? That's just strange. I don't know how you'd explain that, really. In our number 8 spot today, we have Hold It. Remind Taylor and I that we can never take a trip to Switzerland if this law really does exist. Not because it's not a stunningly beautiful place and I'm sure filled with wonderful people, but because I'm not sure we could take this trip without breaking this law. Basically, if you're one of those people like Taylor who wakes up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, make sure you don't flush if you're in Switzerland and it's after 10 p.m. because this is actually considered to be contributing to noise pollution. That flushing sound might just mean that you are breaking the law. I mean, it seems a little extreme, but as someone who really values peace and quiet, I do kind of understand this one a little bit. That or toilets in Switzerland are just extremely loud and I am blissfully unaware. Can any Swiss people confirm this one? What do you do in this case? I just have a lot of questions. In our number 7 spot today, we have No Fun. Since 1966 in Victoria, Australia, it has been illegal to fly a kite in a public space if it bothers someone else. You actually can't even play a game in a public space if it's gonna annoy someone else. Really hope you don't have a Karen in the neighborhood, I guess, or no jump rope for you. This was listed as a part of the Summary Offences Act, but it's crazy that this is something that came into effect as recently as 1966 and not hundreds of years ago. It just seems like such a random rule to instate. And it was way more popular to see these kinds of quote no fun laws in legislation from centuries ago. Or footloose, I guess. Anyways, all of this aside, I don't think that there are many Aussies who will be upset if you choose to fly a kite on a nice breezy day. In our number 6 spot today, we have selfie etiquette. This is one law that actually makes quite a bit of sense to me. This law comes from Sri Lanka, and it basically has to do with the etiquette that should be seen when someone is around a statue of Buddha. Of course, many people, whether local or tourists, will stop at a Buddha statue to admire it, to pay respects, to pray, and in this day and age, of course, a lot of times this comes with a selfie. Here's the thing though, regular selfie pose is a no-no for this one, and that is because turning your back to Buddha is a huge offense. You could be forced to delete the photos. I mean, who would even want the evidence of you committing this crime anyway? And if you were to refuse deleting them, things might go as far as to have the police called. There are definitely other ways, positions, and poses where you can snap a pic with the statue, but just never with your back to it. In our number 5 spot today, we have tree climbers. I feel like I should have known of this law before, especially considering the fact that it comes from just outside of Toronto in Oshawa, Ontario, but despite that, this one is news to me. Don't get too excited on your next park day in Oshawa and end up climbing a tree, because that is apparently strictly forbidden. One of the bylaws for the city says, quote, no person shall interfere with a tree or part of a tree located on municipal property, including, but not limited to, attaching, affixing, or placing upon in any matter any object or thing to a tree or part of a tree and climbing the tree. That was a long way to say that. Yeah, the law states that there is just simply no tree climbing allowed. This does again seem like a kind of footloose rule, but it is said to have been made with only safety in mind. The Canadian law discussion talked about how this law came to be and said that it was put in place to stop citizens from trying to act like Spider-Man. The city of Oshawa is just out here trying to care for the citizens and their safety. In our number 4 spot today, we have royal fish. This is one law that came into existence because someone was feeling a little greedy. Since 1324, it has been decreed that all beached whales in the UK belong to the king or queen, and we can all thank Edward II for this one. In 1324, he passed a law defining whales, sturgeons, dolphins, and porpoises caught within 5 kilometers of the shore as, quote, royal fish. These fish collected a lot of money in medieval markets, and those who were wealthy wanted these fish for their special feasts and their banquets. So of course, instead of purchasing them with your riches, what else would you do? Well, you just make up a law so that you can steal them, of course. What's even crazier is that this law actually hasn't been repealed, and in 2014 there was a fisherman who caught a 10-foot sturgeon near Wales, and he actually had to ask Queen Elizabeth's permission to sell it. Apparently, she told him that he could use the catch quote as he saw fit. In our number 3 spot today, we have the light bulb moment. Another Victoria, Australia law. Apparently, it is illegal to change a light bulb. At first, I thought it was a little insane, but basically, you just need a valid license to do so, which means only certified electricians are allowed to change them. It is a little extreme and probably really inconvenient, but I think that playing this one on the safe side can't be ridiculed too much. Electricity could be a pretty terrifying thing, especially when you don't really know what you're doing. For sure, not the most difficult task an electrician faces, but hey, it's gotta be done. I just have to ask though, what happens if your light goes out on like a Saturday or a Sunday? Do you have to pay premium light bulb changing prices? How much does the light bulb change cost in the first place? Who supplies the light bulbs? I don't know, I've just got a lot of questions. In our number 2 spot today, we have walking time. Dogs everywhere, rejoice, this one is for you. If you live in Turin, Italy and have a dog, you better be prepared to get your steps in because taking your dog for any less than 3 walks a day is considered a crime. This one makes a lot of sense considering how many neglectful dog owners are out there, and I am totally on board with holding these people accountable. Not getting outside for 3 walks a day could land you a fine of 500 euros. Italy is known as an animal-loving nation, and they actually have a few other laws in place to protect animals, including strays. If you're planning on or already live in Italy, this law is definitely something to consider before getting a beloved furry friend. Honestly, even outside of Italy, this is something that every dog owner should get in the habit of practicing, under the threat of fine or not. In our number 1 spot today, we have birthday rules. This is a law that I can surely get behind. In Samoa, it is illegal to forget your wife's birthday. I've always agreed that this should in fact be a crime. Should you happen to be forgetful and end up missing this day, you are required to compensate your wife for doing so, and if your wife was feeling extra spiteful and decided to perhaps complain to the police, you might even have to answer to the law. Definitely one of the more extreme and surprising laws on this list, but I'm sure the wives are happy. I guess here it's definitely good practice to keep your wife as happy as possible, or else, who knows, she might just go end up complaining about it to the police.
Starting off this countdown, we have the pests. One very important thing to know about Antarctica is that its ecosystem is pretty fragile. This is due to climate change, loss of biodiversity, human impacts, and the accidental introduction of non-native or alien species. Somehow, we as humans have introduced 121 types of fungi, 72 invertebrates, 8 mammals, and 3 bird species. Now, there are even worms in Antarctica. This is why Antarctica has a don't pack a pest rule. This means that before coming to Antarctica, everything you bring must be thoroughly washed, decontaminated, and inspected. This is to make sure you don't got any tiny seeds on ya. They'll even hoover you just to make sure. It's pretty intense, but it's done in order to protect Antarctica. Moving on to number 9, we have no souvenirs. So you took a trip to Antarctica and you want to take something as a memento to remember your trip by. Too bad, you're not allowed to. Taking anything home from Antarctica is banned. That includes a small pebble from a beach or a small bird feather. You can't take any kind of biological material home. Now the reasoning behind this is that there are around 10,000 scientists operating there. They don't want you accidentally taking a fossil home with you or something. You also can't take any equipment you find randomly, even if it's unattended, because chances are it's research equipment and that would be stealing. There's no finders keepers rule in Antarctica, sorry. Moving on to number 8, we have the lichen. Believe it or not, but plants do grow in Antarctica. When people think of this continent, they think of it as a cold, barren place, which is fair, but several types of grass, moss, and lichen grow there. One rule that Antarctica has is that you are prohibited from walking on the lichen. Now, it's because that it takes such a long time to grow, and if it gets damaged, it'll take an even longer time to repair itself. And it may not look like much, but it's vital to Antarctica's ecosystem. In our 7th spot, we have the rescue. Now, Antarctica is pretty freaking big. It's twice the size of Australia, and it has the lowest recorded temperature on Earth. Not only that, but there's not a lot of people living there, which is why, if you're in danger, don't expect to be rescued. It sounds depressing, but it's just realistic. And with Antarctica's unpredictable weather conditions, rescues are basically impossible. Tour groups literally will tell you not to stray away. If anything happens to you, you're kind of SOL. This place might be beautiful, but it's harsh and full of unseen dangers. In In our 6th spot, we have the no guns law. Antarctica is a demilitarized zone, meaning absolutely no military activity can take place there. This means that there cannot be any military bases or structures of any kind, and absolutely no weapons testing. With that comes the no weapons law. No firearms or explosive devices are allowed there unless you have been given direct permission. Now, officials in Antarctica do have a firearm, but it's locked away in a glass cabinet in the station master's office. It's a 12-gauge shotgun, and it's only used in emergency situations. According to a local, the only time the station master used this gun was when a man was chasing another man around town with a butcher knife, shouting something about aliens. The next day, the station master was seen escorting this man, who was placed in a straitjacket, onto a plane to get him out of there. He had his gun with him as protection. Other than him, you're not allowed to have any firearms in your possession. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the dolphins. Dolphins are cute, right? Maybe you want to go out whale and dolphin watching and you just want to get close to them. Well, don't. There is a rule in Antarctica that states you must leave the dolphins alone. This includes sailing a boat directly into a group of dolphins to try and get them to bow ride with you. Now, they have been known to do this on their own, but it's forbidden to harass these mammals in an attempt to get them to do it. Not only that, but Antarctica is home to hourglass dolphins. These types of dolphins are very rare and not yet threatened, so they want to keep it that way. In our 4th spot today, we have the wisdom teeth removal. Turns out that you gotta get your wisdom teeth removed before going to Antarctica. This is mainly important for people wanting to stay there for a while or those that are going to work there. If you're doing a quick visit, then you don't really gotta worry about this. Now, having your wisdom teeth removed lessens the risk of having a medical emergency since medical aid is very limited there. But not everyone needs to have them removed. You have to undergo rigorous medical and dental exams before going to Antarctica. So if it's found that your wisdom teeth won't be a problem, then you don't have to have them removed. In our 3rd spot, we have the nuclear weapons. Antarctica is a nuclear-free zone. You know, just in case you were thinking about bringing a nuclear bomb or something with you, you can't. I'm sorry. On top of that, it cannot be used for testing nuclear weapons. A treaty was made when test explosions were being carried out in the South Pacific. They were scared that Antarctica, being largely deserted, was going to be an area where people also wanted to conduct nuclear testing. But this treaty prohibits them from doing so. You're also not allowed to use Antarctica for the disposal of nuclear waste. Moving on to number 2, we have the appendix removal. If you're going to Antarctica for an extended period of time to visit, live, or work there, there's just one tiny little thing you have to cough up. Your appendix. Yeah, you heard me. Anyone there for a long time has to get their appendix removed. Now, this is because the nearest major hospital is 1,000 kilometers away or 625 miles. And there are only a few doctors on base and none are specialist surgeons. So if something goes wrong with your appendix, they won't be able to help you. Now, there are also doctors available in the research bases. Again, none of them are surgeons who can operate on appendixes. Also, let's say something severe does happen. Medical evacuations take a lot of time and effort and end up putting everyone else at risk. So they make people get their appendix removed as a preventative measure. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the jurisdiction. Now, the jurisdiction of Antarctica is confusing. And that's because Antarctica doesn't belong to anyone. There is no single country that owns Antarctica. So when you visit, you're under the jurisdiction of your own country. Same with the researchers working there, regardless of which national station they may visit. So when there, you are subjected to the laws of your country. If you break any of the rules of the Antarctic Treaty, you face the laws on that when you return home. Same thing goes if you commit a crime there, you face punishment when you return home. Starting off this countdown, we have the weight. In 2008, a law was introduced which made it mandatory for citizens between the ages of 40 to 74 to have their waists measured regularly. Women
can only be 35.4 inches and men can only be 33.5 inches. If you are found bigger than that, then you have to lose weight according to this law. Not only that, but you might even be subjected to fines. I mean, Japan is known for their low obesity rates, and this is one of the factors as to why. In our 9th spot today, we have the ice cream. Now this is a very bizarre law. Basically, it's illegal to put ice cream in mailboxes. First off, who in their right mind would even think to do something like that? Like, I'm done with this ice cream, where should I put it? The garbage? No, the mailbox. So this law was implemented after a postal service worker put a chocolate ice cream in the mailbox in 2006. Since then, it's been made illegal and offenders are subjected to a hefty fine. You could be imprisoned for up to 5 years or be fined around 4,000 USD. In our 8th spot today, we have your neighbor's mail. Now, I'm sure this has happened to you at least once, but you go home, you check your mail, then you realize that the envelope has your neighbor's name on it. Oops, the mailman delivered your neighbor's mail to your address. So you're like, no problem, I'll just walk to their house and pop it in their mailbox. Boom, wrong, no, arrested. In Japan, it's illegal to hand your neighbors misaddressed mail to them. This is featured in Article 42 of the Postal Law. Basically, they have this in place to protect the privacy of both the sender and recipient. So if any mail that's not yours accidentally gets in your mailbox, you have to send it back to the post office and then they handle it. Which seems like a lot of work when they literally live next door to you, but sorry, that's just how the law is. In our 7th spot today, we have the divorce law. This is another pretty wild law. So if you're a woman and you get divorced by law, you have to wait 6 months before remarrying again. And if you give birth to a child during those 6 months, the child is legally your ex-husband's. As for men, well, they can just remarry instantly. Now, there actually is somewhat a reasonable explanation behind this, somewhat. So let's say the woman does remarry instantly after divorce, and then she finds out, oh no, I'm pregnant. Well, how would she know who the father is? So the 6-month rule is in place so that it's going to be clear who the kid's father is. In 2016, the law was amended. Now the law is women can remarry immediately after divorce as long as they aren't pregnant. If they are, then they have to wait 100 days to remarry. And a child born within 300 days of divorce is still legally considered the child of the original husband, even if it's not his. In our 6th spot today, we have the married couple. Now, most married couples do live together, but in Japan, they must. It's illegal for married couples to live separately unless they have a just cause. Now, why is this a law, you may ask? Well, it was passed to prevent divorce rates from spiking. If you're living away from your partner, the separation might take a toll on your relationship. But like I said, most couples do live together after marriage, so it's not that big of a law. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with indecent exposure. In Japan, it's illegal to expose your thighs or your bum in public. The law was passed in 1948 under the Light Crimes Act. However, this law is rarely enforced, and most women still like to wear miniskirts in public. But if the cops are really out looking for people, then you could be arrested and put in jail for up to 29 days. While we're on the topic of legs, crossing your legs in Japan is considered very casual and improper. In Japan, you are expected to sit tall with both feet on the floor and never cross your ankles over your knee. But don't worry, there's no law surrounding this, so you won't be arrested for accidentally crossing over your legs. It's more so a manner thing, you know, it just can be perceived as rude. In our 4th spot today, we have smoking. Now, most people smoke outdoors and think that's the proper place to smoke. Well, not in Japan. Outdoor smoking is actually banned in Japan. The only place you can smoke outdoors is in designated smoking areas. But smoking is prohibited on the main streets. If you want to smoke, it has to be in these designated areas. They do this to be courteous of the people who don't wish to partake in smoking. What else might surprise you is that many restaurants and bars let you smoke inside. In our 3rd spot today, we have drinking. In Japan, you are allowed to drink in public. It's one of the few countries where it's fine to walk around with a beer in hand. In fact, they even have vending machines that sell alcoholic beverages in public. That being said, if you're hammered walking around the streets and being rowdy, you can be arrested. That's a no-no. Plus, drinking is usually an evening activity, so it's frowned upon if people see you walking around with a drink at like 10 in the morning. Moving on to number 2, we have the walkie-talkies. Okay, so you're planning your trip to Japan. You got your essentials, you got your underwear, your toothbrush, your toothpaste. Did you bring your walkie-talkie? Now I know what you're thinking. Who would want to bring a walkie-talkie with them to Japan? Don't ask me, maybe you have kids that get lost easily and it's too expensive to have an international phone plan. Well, if you're planning to bring walkie-talkies, think again. It is illegal to own walkie-talkies bought from another country. Now, this actually has a really good reason behind it. Japan relies heavily on their radio network to relay important information. Any foreign walkie-talkies can possibly interfere with their signals, so they made them illegal. If you're caught with one, you can face 1 year in prison with fines up to around 9,000 USD. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the dancing. For the longest time, dancing at public venues was illegal. That's right, dancing was illegal. The only place you could dance was at venues with a special dancing license, and you could only dance until midnight. It was illegal as soon as it struck 12. They did this in 1948 as a way to try and get rid of prostitution in these dance halls. Just recently they changed the laws so you can dance after midnight, but the venue has to keep their lights on. So as soon as it's midnight in Japan, the lights turn on if you want to keep dancing. If venues don't follow this law, they could get in serious trouble. Alright guys, that's all for today's video. Let me know in the comments below where you are from. Do I have any viewers from Japan here? If so, let me know about these laws. I'm actually fascinated.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have royal fish. This is one law that came into existence because someone was feeling a little greedy. Since 1327, it has been decreed that all beached whales in the UK belong to the king or queen, and we can all thank Edward II for this one. In 1324, he passed a law defining whales, sturgeons, dolphins, and porpoises caught within 5 kilometers of the shore as royal fish. These fish collected a lot of money in medieval markets, and those who were wealthy wanted these fish for their special feasts and banquets. Of course, instead of purchasing them with your riches, what do? Well, you just make up an insane law so that you can steal them, of course. What's even crazier is that this law actually hasn't been repealed, and in 2004 there was a fisherman who caught a 10-foot sturgeon near Wales, and he actually had to ask Queen Elizabeth's permission to sell it. Apparently she told him that he could use the catch, quote, as he saw fit. In our number 9 spot today, we have strange cows. This law is one that was repealed in 1974 because at one point, I'm sure this made a lot of sense, but surely by 1974 and especially by now, it is simply just hilarious. This law is from Texas, and it stated that whoever, without the consent of the owner, shall take up, use, or milk any cow not his own, faced a $10 fine. How weirdly specific. There was a law and a specific amount of a fine set up just for milking a stranger's cow. I mean, I feel like I understand why this one is illegal, because how strange is it to just milk someone else's cow? A little intrusive if you ask me, to be honest. Of course, the only reason you'd be milking someone else's cow would be to steal the milk, and that is still rude to do now, but back in the day that could have had much heavier implications. Although that specific law was repealed, there is still a law in Texas that is in regards to the same sort of thing. It is still illegal to milk someone else's cow without permission, but now you'll be charged with theft and trespassing instead of a flat $10 rate. Also, who wants to be the weirdo stealing milk straight from a cow? In our number 8 spot today, we have cold feet. Okay, apparently since 19th century France, it's been legal to marry a dead person. Yeah, had to cut right to the chase with this one because beating around the bush simply just didn't seem right. Also known as necromancy, this law dates back to times when being born out of wedlock was a big no-no. So, say if your husband was to be out at war while you were pregnant and he ended up passing away in the war, this law would help to ensure that your child was born from within a marriage. The consent of the person who passed away could either be given by their family or if there was an existing engagement before they passed. This law still does actually exist in a way, with the most current form coming in 1959 after a terrible incident where a dam burst and 423 people lost their lives. One of the most recent examples of this was in 2017 when someone's partner was killed in a terror attack and he was still able to marry his partner posthumously. While this law sounded a little weird in the beginning, I am glad to know that it had some practical and important uses. In our number 7 spot today, we have no fun. Since 1966 in Victoria, Australia, it has been illegal to fly a kite in a public space if it bothers someone else. You actually can't even play a game in a public space if it's gonna annoy someone else. I really hope you don't have a Karen in the neighborhood, I guess, or no jump rope for you. This was listed as a part of the Summary Offences Act, but it's crazy that this is something that came into effect as recently as 1966 and not hundreds of years ago. It just seems like such a random rule to instate. And it was way more popular to see these kinds of no fun laws in legislation from centuries ago. Or footloose, I guess. Anyways, all of this aside, I don't think that there are many Aussies who will be upset if you choose to fly a kite on a nice breezy day. In our number 6 spot today, we have no UFO parking. After a man in this French winemaking town reported seeing aliens leave in a cigar-shaped UFO, the town of Châteauneuf-du-Pape made this law as follows. Article 1. The overflight, the landing, and the takeoff of aircraft known as flying saucers or flying cigars, whatever their nationality is, are prohibited on the territory of the community. Article 2. Any aircraft known as flying saucer or flying cigar which should land on the territory of the community will be immediately held in custody. Article 3. The forest officer and the city policeman are in charge, each one in what relates to him, of the execution of this decree. Not only is this law hilarious, but it's also super effective because they haven't seen any aliens or UFOs since it was passed in 1954. I really do respect them for doing what they can to protect their vineyards, however, but maybe the aliens just want a little wine too. In our number 5 spot today, we have no gum. You know when some people choose to do something wrong and then it ruins things for everyone who wasn't doing the wrong thing? Yeah, that's what happened in Singapore, and now no one can chew gum. There were some people who decided to try and mess with the mass rapid transit system, and they used chewing gum to do it. These people ended up costing the Housing and Development Board $150,000 a year just to clean up this gum, so in 1992, they banned it. They banned all gum substances, and so anyone importing, selling, or making gum can potentially face fines or even jail time. In 2004, however, there was an exception made for those who needed gum for therapeutic, dental, or nicotine chewing gum reasons, and those can be bought from a doctor or pharmacist. I wonder if there's an underground gum ring in Singapore now. In our number 4 spot today, we have no high heels. This law is a strange one, but it will be no problem for the overpacker in your life. If you're taking a trip to Greece anytime soon, make sure you don't pack only high heels, because if you do, then you won't be able to visit the Acropolis. That's right, in 2009 the country banned wearing high heels there. I really don't know why anyone would want to walk around there in high heels. I mean, ruins and dirt don't exactly make me scream stilettos, but clearly it was happening enough that a rule needed to be made. This rule, although seemingly random, is actually important. As it turns out, people's sharp shoes may have been damaging the sight, and truly that's just not worth it. The ruins are 2,500 years old, so at this point I feel like we can throw on a pair of Vans and call it a day. No one needs to wear black tie attire when visiting a historical site. Like, sorry I forgot my ball gown, can I still visit Göbekli Tepe? That was a dumb joke. In our number 3 spot today, we have jellicle cats. In 1939, in what was called, quote, a war measure to alleviate mental strain upon the populace, the town of French Lick Springs, Indiana passed a law that required all black cats to wear bells on Friday the 13th. This would make sure that anyone who heard a cat's bell was able to avoid crossing their path and having bad luck. I honestly feel like I should be making this up, but it's true. I guess I can really appreciate them doing what they can to alleviate the stressors in the lives of those who are having to live through a world war, but it just seems like there's so many other way more stressful parts of a war than black cats on one specific day. Like, imagine if we were entering World War III and we were like, nuclear bunkers, and the government was like, no, but you don't have to worry about black cats anymore. In our number 2 spot today, we have Winnie the Pooh. Winnie the Pooh Bear is a well-known and loved animated figure, but he doesn't wear pants, and apparently a pantsless bear is upsetting to some people. Because of this weird issue, there's apparently a law in Poland that has banned Winnie the Pooh from playgrounds and schools. I mean, wait till they hear about all the pantsless and shirtless bears that are just walking around outside. I'm not sure how they'll be able to keep it together. I'm not exactly sure how far this one can be taken. I mean, if your kid has a Winnie the Pooh sticker, are they gonna be sent to jail? Probably not. I mean, even a fine seems a little ridiculous though, right? I don't know. I guess there's a reason I don't make laws. Winnie the Pooh is just a little too risque these days, I guess. In our number 1 spot today we have Footloose. Since we mentioned it all the way back at number 7, let's talk about a very real sort of Footloose situation. This law was instituted in Japan and was enacted in 1948 while US soldiers were occupying. Basically, the idea behind it was to stop Americans from corrupting the citizens of Japan, and basically dancing in a club after midnight was banned. It is said that dance halls often used to be fronts for other businesses during this time when the nation was poverty stricken. The activity was considered just too sinful, but now, since Japan is one of the largest economies in the world with a high standard of living and a vibrant nightlife, the ban was finally lifted in 2015. There is still a rule around post-midnight dancing though, it's just slightly more relaxed. You can dance, but once the clock strikes midnight, you need to be doing it in a well-lit room. I'm not sure what that changes, but what I do know is that when the lights come on after last call, it's time to go. Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Little White Lie. The Yurnamu Code is a code or a group of Sumerian laws that were drafted sometime between 2100 and 2050 BC. This is so long ago, of course things were really different, but there are some laws and rules from that time that really make you go, what? One of these is the bizarre one that pertains to kidnapping. Of course, kidnapping is never good, and they knew that back then, but they were a little more liberal or forgiving when it came to certain scenarios. So basically, according to these rules, kidnapping was punishable by but only if both the kidnapper and the kidnappee were free men. If the person who was kidnapped was a slave, the sentence was just a monetary fine. Okay, that's pretty messed up, but it's not necessarily all of that bizarre to hear about the mistreatment of slaves in history. I mean, I said slaves, it was bad from the get-go, and this rule was certainly no exception. But it gets even more bizarre from here. If the person who was taken was a woman, well, I mean, a little white lie and you're good to go. By this I mean, should the kidnapper just claim that the woman had been found in the street alone without a companion, this was enough to get off scot-free because, I mean, how could he possibly know whether or not she belonged to anyone? Yeah, that really was the thought process back then. You see what I mean when I say it's just a law that makes absolutely no sense? Kidnapping is bad. It's so bad we'll put you to death, but like, it's only kinda bad when it's like this. Just kidnap the right way and we'll have no issues. In our number 9 spot today we have royal fish. This is one law that came into existence because someone was feeling a little greedy. Since 1324 it has been decreed that all beached whales in the UK belong to the king or queen, and we can all thank Edward II for this weird one. In 1324 he passed a law defining whales, sturgeons, dolphins, and porpoises caught within 5 kilometers of the shore as quote royal fish. These fish collected a lot of money in medieval markets, and those who were wealthy wanted these fish for their special feasts and banquets. Of course, instead of purchasing them with your riches, what do? Well, you just make up an insane law so that you can steal them, of course. What's even crazier is that this law actually hasn't been repealed, and in 2004 there was a fisherman who caught a 10-foot sturgeon near Wales, and he actually had to ask Queen Elizabeth's permission to sell it. Apparently she told him that he could use the catch as he saw fit. In our number 8 spot today we have the Flamen Dialis. In ancient Roman religion, the Flamen Dialis was the high priest of Jupiter. There are other forms of flamen or high priests, and many of them had bizarre rules surrounding them that they had to follow, but these are some of the strangest. Among the rules set out for the high priest of Jupiter, there were rules that forbade them to touch iron or flour. They were not allowed to ride a horse. Okay, this is weird so far, but not like too bad, right? Well, they also had this rule where if a prisoner enters their home, they must be released. Then their chains must be taken through the hole in the roof and then from the roof dropped into the street. That sounds both weird, oddly specific, and like a lot of work for no reason. The rules don't end there though. The Flamen Dialis also was not to touch or name a female goat. No flame could be carried out of their house unless it was for sacred purpose, and there must be a box of sacrificial cakes at the foot of his bed. This is actually just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the rules these people had to live by. Many of the rest really are just as curious and bizarre. I'll say this, the life of a Flamen Dialis certainly must have been anything but boring. In our number 7 spot today we have Draco's rules. Draco of Thessaly has often been considered the author of the very first laws of Athens, which came around 621 BC, and some of the very first draconian codes were very simple. The jury is out on whether or not they were effective, but it was definitely clear. It goes basically as follows. Did you kill someone? penalty. Did you steal someone else's goat or whatever animals they had in ancient Athens? Penalty. Did you accidentally forget to pay your taxes? Penalty. You get the idea. You commit a crime? Well, that's it. No second chances on this guy's watch. That's literally it. You're done. Sorry, you should have thought of that before you committed a crime. Also, there's some crazy things that were considered crimes back then, so I can't imagine. Anyway, thankfully his successor wasn't quite so harsh and changed basically all of that, except for the whole death penalty for killing someone thing, which, like, fair. At the very least, it's quite a bit more reasonable. In our number 6 spot today we have marital infidelity in Mesopotamia. Hammurabi was an ancient Babylonian king and he ruled Mesopotamia from 1792 until 1750 BC, and during his reign he produced some of the earliest legal codes in history. He created what became known as the Code of Hammurabi, which consisted of 282 laws, which were listed in a sort of if-then kind of format. Each law was distinct to a social class, and the punishments were specific to the type of infraction. There were many bizarre rules here, but one of the strangest parts were the different punishments for men and women, specifically in regard to marital infidelity. So basically, men were allowed to have extramarital affairs with maids, servants, slaves, you know, of course. Women, however, what are you, crazy? Any woman found philandering and their secret lovers were punished by being bound and tossed into the Euphrates. I'm gonna go ahead and say it. Call me crazy, it's just a little bit of a double standard. I don't know, maybe I'm just too futuristic for Mesopotamia. In our number 5 spot today we have a punishment worse than This is more so a punishment for breaking the law rather than the actual law itself, but it's something that I didn't know previously and I found exceptionally interesting. This comes from the Qin dynasty and it involves something worse than the death penalty. You might be wondering how something could be worse than the death penalty, and to that I say, great question, here's how. The penalty could be intensified based on the method that was selected for it. Like, sometimes the person who had committed the crime would end up having their entire family executed. That's probably the worst thing I can imagine. Sometimes the criminal, if sentenced to death, would then have their body exposed in the marketplace or their head mounted on a pike, which was meant to disgrace their death. Not only these after humiliations, but sometimes torment also occurred. So yeah, surprisingly, the penalty can actually get worse. In our number 4 spot today we have nope. Okay, this is a disgusting one. I'm sorry we're talking about it, but it's what the video calls for. This law comes from the ancient Anatolian people who formed an empire between 1600 and 1180 BC. This law is about what happens when a person does something to an animal. I don't want to say it, so we're probably thinking the same thing. It's messed up, you get me. So this law explains that the punishment for this crime depends on what animal it was with. A dog or a pig? No way, buddy. Not on our ancient watch. That's punishable by a horse or a mule? You're a messed up dude, and for that, you never get to appear before the king again. He can't even look at you. A cow? Well, here's the thing. The king is going to decide what happens because this one needs to be taken on a case-by-case basis. See what I mean by this law that makes no sense? I'm glad that they were at least punishing people for this back then. I think we can all agree that that's the right thing to do, but it's just very strange that it differed depending on the animal. You know? In our number 3 spot today we have who's to blame. Okay, we've been having a silly fun time for most of this list despite the various bizarre laws that have existed, but this one is definitely a little more serious, and it's one that, especially as a woman, is definitely a touch infuriating. This law comes from Nessalem, another one of the laws by the ancient Anatolian peoples. So basically this law starts off a little better than it ends. It has to do with when someone harms a woman. Normally, under this law, this would be punishable by death. This is where the law goes a bit awry, however. That is the case only when the crime is committed abroad. At home, however, oh, total free-for-all. If this crime happened at home, of course the woman was actually guilty. Not only that, but she would then be condemned to death instead of the person who did that to her. I actually couldn't believe it when I read it. Things simply were just different back then, and I truly feel grateful that this isn't a law that has stuck around. It does make me feel exceptionally bad for the women who found themselves victim to this insane rule, however. In our number 2 spot today we have the roast battle. This is perhaps one of my favorite laws, and it's one I think we should bring back. This is officially my petition. This law is hilarious with just a little less harsh of a sentence, you'll see what I mean. This law comes from ancient Rome and the law of the 12 tables, and basically it condemned anyone who sang a joking or mocking song about someone else to But the sentence only came if what the person saying was untrue. If you just roasted the hell out of someone and everyone turned around and said, well, where's the lie? Then there's no problem. Carry on, you little musical genius, you. I mean, at least they were taking a stand against bullying all the way back then. I just think it's insane that the law is so extreme. Like a little silly ditty that's just part of a rumor mill is an absolute no-go. Don't tell the ancient Romans about magazines and tabloids or diss tracks. They'll be so mad. In our #1 spot today, we have the innocence test. Another one of the rules that comes from the Code of Hammurabi is one that forces accusers to prove their accusations indisputably. Okay, they have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. We still go by that, so that's not really that weird. What is weird, however, or maybe dramatic is a better way to put it, is that if they failed to do this, they would then be condemned to biggest Uno reverse card in history. Like, even knowingly false accusations probably shouldn't be punished with the sentence, but imagine just not having enough evidence to convince everyone and then you have to die because of it? Like, it's not like DNA testing or photos or videos existed, so how do you prove these things in a way everyone will believe you? It seems way too risky to even try. Also, one of the methods used to try and test someone's innocence is to throw the accused into the river. If they drowned, it was because the gods knew that they were guilty, but if they managed to get out alive, they were considered innocent, and then their accuser was executed for falsehood. Like, I'm not taking the chance on whether or not this guy can tread water.